Welcome to My The Asshole Podcast. Let's get into it. All right, today is Thursday, and you guys know what Thursday is. We're going to be reading 2 more chapters of the book we've been going through called A Court of Thorns and Roses. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the story. I know I am. It's starting to get a little juicy, you know. Our main girl, she's finally got to this magnificent place of the fairies, if you will. She's kind of meeting everybody and seeing what's going on. And these motherfuckers got a mansion. Like, she out here living in the lap of luxury, you know. And I'm just like, is she really a prisoner or what's going on here? Because it seemed like she out here living in the lap of luxury. But we'll get to that. We'll be doing chapters 7 and 8 today, so hopefully you guys enjoy those chapters. But before we get into the book, we have our thread, and today's thread is pretty interesting. What's the creepiest thing that happened to you? All right, so let's check out what creepy things have happened to you guys, and then we'll hop into our book. As a kid, I used to help an elderly lady across the street. She lived alone with yard work. I hadn't seen her in quite a while, so I went over to check. I found her laying dead on her kitchen floor, her cat crying for food. She had been dead for some time, apparently never having seen death before. It really creeped me out. Oh my God. Oh, wow. I mean, I'm glad that you found her, and hopefully the cat found a home. Like, that's so sad. Oh my God. And it's a thing where it's like, I don't mean to be an asshole, but I feel a little more bad for the cat than I do her. Like, you know, she passed away, and I hope it was maybe it wasn't, I don't know, but I hope it was quick and painless, because I know that's really tough. But damn, she didn't have any family, nothing. Like, oh, but that would creep me out though. That would, just seeing a person that's not alive anymore. Oh, this one weirded me out a bit. For a few years ago, I woke up to 2 text messages from my girlfriend and a friend of mine, both asking if I was all right. Apparently, they both had a dream that I had been struck by a red truck and at an intersection I routinely took. The 2 of them weren't close, and I had no reason to suspect that they were playing a prank. It was just really spooky that they had both had the same dream that night with the same details. I would have definitely taken a different route to work that day, because there is no way in hell that kind of coincidence would happen, and I would just be like, I'm just going to take the same way to work. No. That's some wild foreshadowing of something that could happen, and you never even know. Oh, all right. My wife and I just bought a new house. After we took possession of the keys, we stopped by to look it over. Stopped by to look it over and plan some projects. I noticed the faucet in the kitchen dripping. I took it apart, changed the washer, but couldn't get it put back together. Okay. I was really frustrated, and my wife was impatient, so I just left it with all the parts scattered across the counter. When I came back the next day, the faucet was fully reassembled and wasn't leaking anymore. Maybe it could have been the people. Well, no, you took the keys already. So I want to say like what? Maybe he has like a helpful demon. You know what I mean? You know, the demon is just walking around, and he's just like, God, man, all right, let me just put this back together for these people. Fucking A. I'm haunting the fuck out of you guys for this, you know. I don't know. I'm just saying, it's like that's weird, because they've already taken hold of the keys. It could have been the previous owners. It could have been the what's it called? The real estate agent or something. It could have been any one of them if they still had access to the house, but I don't know. That is a mystery. All right, in high school, I was applying for a job in a supermarket. I had just come from school and was still wearing my uniform. The counter to apply was a little high for me, so I had to stand on my toes. Anyway, after being there for about 5 minutes, a woman taps me on the shoulder and says, "Not sure how to tell you this, but I wouldn't feel right not saying anything. That man just took a photo under your skirt." I looked and there was this dude speed walking to the subway entrance. I couldn't catch up, but even if I did, what would I have done? That was weird. Oh, wow. Fucking pedophiles and shit. Man, that's crazy, dude. And it does make sense. It's like, even if you caught up to him, what would you even do? You know what I mean? It's not like you can make him. I mean, you could have like publicly shamed him or something, but even then it's just like, it's kind of not worth it. It's like, just let him have the picture at that point. Like, it sucks because you never know what he's going to do with that picture. But again, what would you do? You could try to call the police. You could try to do something, but I mean, at least, the lady was looking out for you. Damn, that is creepy, though. Just some random person having a picture of your butt cheeks or something, like, oh. Went to a bar about 20 minutes from my apartment in Brooklyn because of construction and because I didn't know the way home. I had lived there for about a month. It took some time to get home. When I got there, I noticed I had a Facebook message from someone I didn't know. Checked it, and it was some guy saying, "Nice apartment. Can I come in?" I looked outside, and there was some guy who had followed me home. I hadn't given my friends my new address yet, and he may have gotten my Facebook from a friend at the bar. I bolted the door and blocked him. The fact that he followed me and just randomly texted me rather than talk to me at the bar was unnerving. Dude, what? Why would you follow her home and expect to you could have even had a conversation with her on the way to her house or whatever. Hey, no, excuse me, catch her and just be like, "I'm so sorry. I really wanted to talk to you. You were in the bar. You kind of seemed just super busy. I didn't get the chance to, but I wanted to talk to you really quick before. Are you heading home or, what's going on?" It's like, "Can I walk you there?" You know what I mean? Like, you could have done this in a different way, but you had to be so fucking creepy about it to follow her on Facebook and then message her, "Hey, I'm outside. Can I come in?" No, you can't. But you probably would have been able to go inside if you had the conversation with her outside of the bar, maybe walked her home, then you could have had the conversation with her. It's not like she wasn't open to the conversation. That's what it seemed like. So she was just like, "You could have just talked to me at the bar, but you didn't." That's just weird, man. That is just weird. All right. Okay, I was 15 years old. I was at a local mall by myself. I noticed an older guy looking at me in a store. I walked out of the store and the guy followed me for the next hour whenever I went. He was within sight. Oh, yeah. Wherever I went, he was in sight. At one point, I walked out of the door of the mall to the curb. He walked up to me outside and asked me if I needed a ride anywhere. I lied and told him I was waiting for my mom to get off work from Sears. He shrugged and went away. This was back in the 70s. Oh, my God. Okay. Things were different then. Stranger danger wasn't really a thing back then. I probably told my parents about this, and they shrugged it off as most parents back then would. It was a different world. If I'm being honest with you, it's not. It's not, sadly. There are girls to this day still dealing with shit like that, having to lie and say, "Oh yeah, my friend just lives down this way. Oh, my mom works there and I'm just waiting for her to get off of work. Oh, my boyfriend's coming to pick me up." Trust me, it's not a different world. It's still the same shit, different era, if I'm being honest with you. Just And I just think people are getting even worse about it because, as we even saw in the previous story with Homeboy just following Homegirl on Facebook, and that's how he was able to message her and be outside of her house. Like, you know what I mean? It's the same shit, dude. Same shit. That is creepy. All right, about 3 years ago, I lived alone in my apartment. My ex had come over late to spend the night with me. About 3 a.m., someone tried to kick my front door in. It was seriously the loudest explosion I've ever heard. We were sure that they were in my apartment. My dogs were going crazy. I had no weapon to protect us. Boyfriend grabbed a bat and stood at my bedroom door while I hid in the closet, trying to call a neighbor and the police. Finally, neighbors and cops get there. Some dude pissed all over my front door, never broke in though. About a week later, I was cleaning my apartment and had the glass sliding door leading to my patio open. I was on the first floor, but I had the screen door locked. Stupid, I know. Anyway, I'm cleaning along and my dog starts ferociously growling, and I hurry to the living room, and some dude is under my patio just having a standoff with my 150-pound bull mastiff dog. Once he saw me and realized my dog could disembowel him, he ran away. 2 days later, I have 3 long stem roses sitting on my patio. The only access to my patio is either through my apartment, or you have to jump the little fence that surrounds it. About a week later, I noticed that the screen door is cut along the edges, making an entrance big enough to fit through. Around the same time, one of my neighbors called me to make sure my doors were locked because there was some guy pacing back and forth in front of my door. I think this was all that happened. There was a detective assigned to me during this. She suggested that someone might be stalking me. I wanted to move, but her response was, if someone is watching you, they'll just follow you. So fucking helpless until suddenly it all stopped. I could only imagine that whoever it was found someone else or something terrible happened to them. The piss, the kick, the flowers, heebie-jeebies. My goodness. Like, I get it. Yeah, you just can't move. But man, girl, that is terrible. And I'm thinking to myself, damn, how many things have to happen? You know, I'm glad that she has dogs. Like, that's actually a good thing that she has dogs, just because, you know, they can at least be a bit of an alarm system, if you will. But still, God, girl, that's why your boy got a shapash pow, because I ain't about to deal with that. Nah, man, motherfucker want to come up in here, you gonna catch a hot one, son. You gonna catch a hot one, buddy. Like that, nah, man, nah. You ain't gonna go back. You ain't gonna be able to run away, and you ain't gonna be in the back of a police car. You gonna be in the back of an ambulance, my guy. There ain't no way. Ain't no way you about to walk up into my sanctuary, and you know what I mean. And you ain't gonna have some consequences to that. Like, and especially for her, she lives alone too. I'm surprised her man didn't sleep over a little more just because of what's going on. You know. Because that would freak me the hell out. Or I would even have her stay with me for a couple of days. You know what I mean? Just so that way, just until shit dies down. But damn, that is extremely creepy. Like, she had a stalker to the max. Damn. All right, I was alone in the house. An unknowing member called me, and I could hear the same TV show I was watching. I kept saying hello, and my voice would echo back. I thought it was just one of those broken calls where you hear your mic feedback, but what happened next creeped me out. Right before I put down the call, I hear a voice whispering, "Goodbye, good night." I stared at the phone, confused of what happened, and then I said hello again. The static and the echo disappeared. It was all quiet, and then suddenly, hi. I put down the phone, turned off the TV, and ran to bed. Yo! Wow! Oh, fuck no. Oh, fuck no. I would have called the police something so fast, you have no idea. That is scary. That is extremely scary. Like, the call is coming from inside the house. Like, Oh, God, no. Oh, fuck no, dude. Damn. That is extremely creepy. When I moved to my first apartment at age 18, which was in a large subdivided house, I didn't have a bed yet and slept on a pile of my clothes. Somehow I came up in casual conversation with my neighbor, a man in his 60s, and he said he had an extra bed in storage in a shed out back I could borrow. I thanked him and took him up on his offer, and he helped me move the frame and mattress into my apartment and set it up. I went to use the bathroom, and when I came back out, he had put a porn tape into my VHS player and expected me to watch it with him. What the fuck? I would have popped that tape out and I'd have been like, all right, bro, it's time for you to go. Thanks for the bed. I appreciate it, man, but you gotta go. And I feel like he watched it just because he was just like, oh, man, I feel like I owe him. You know what I mean? I so feel like he watched that video. I wouldn't have watched that video. Hell no. I would have told homeboy like, hey, man, thanks. I appreciate it, but you take your fuck tape somewhere else, bro. No thanks. No thanks. Okay. I stopped at a rest stop driving along 95 on the way home from college many years back. While in the bathroom, a middle-aged man made an unconscious comment about the weather to me while we were at a urinal. I said something equally bland in reply. Afterwards, I was sitting in my car right outside trying to fire up some music before taking off. Maybe for 5 minutes, I looked over to my right, and there was the guy sitting in his car with the engine idling, just staring at me down. Staring at me down like I was prey. Okay, I think he meant staring me down like I was prey. I remember having never been stared at like that, but I knew what it meant. I took off and he pursued me in his car. I tried to lose him in the parking lot, but without luck. Just as I was going to get back on the highway to try to lose him, I decided to go inside the rest stop and tell someone. I double parked it right outside, ran in, and frantically told a security guard the story. He came outside with me, and my stalker saw us and sped off towards on the ramp. I'm a dude, and I almost got graped, possibly worse. Man, he was just like, yeah. He's like, I like that penis. I like the way that looks. Like, I'm going to go after this one. Probably got a pretty booty hole. You know? Like, yo! That's great. And as a dude, you would never think. And I mean, ever. You would never think that, like, you could get raped. You know? You just don't think that, ever. And this dude right here was just like, oh my God, I almost experienced that shit, you know? Like, fuck. Yeah, man, nah. When I was about 8 or 9, my sister, friend, and I were walking over into the next neighborhood to fetch another friend. We knocked on the door and took a few moments, and then looked back over to the space in between the two houses in which we walked past to get here. We saw two people, man and woman, walk over and just block that space. They both just stand there and stare at us. The friend tells us we have to go now, but we don't know what to do concerning these two people are standing there. There is another way to get back, but it takes longer and meant walking across a busy road. Not an attractive idea for several 8-year-olds. We knock again and ask her mom to walk us back the long way. She does. And as we hit the road, the two people start following us, even though her mom is here. We hit the busy road and walk across, and then her mom leaves us. The two people run across the street and walk behind us. We began to run. They began to run and follow us all the way back to the neighborhood. We run into our other friend's backyard and hide. They continue to walk around the neighborhood and look for us. We run around behind the houses until we reach our house. We look out the window and they continue looking. They stand there for about an hour before going back. Not too much, but creepy to us back then. Why in the hell would the mom just leave? Like, what in the hell is going on with you, woman? Do you not did she not see what was going on? Did she not understand the situation? Because that's what it seemed like. It seemed like she didn't understand the situation and like what was actually going on and like maybe what was at stake, because there seemed to be a lot more going on, than perceived. Because like, why are these people following these kids? It's a man and a woman on top of that. So it's like, what are they planning to do with these kids? Like, there's just so much where you're just like, what in the hell is going on? Why is it going on? Like, what's happening? That is just weird, dude. That is extremely weird. Wow. Oh, hey. Thank God you got away from them, I guess, because, man, they're just out looking for kids, I guess. Like, damn. When I was about 10 years old, we lived just on the outskirts of the city. We had 2 driveways. One is on the right side of the house, and the other is on the left side further away from the house that leads to the garage. At around 11 p.m., my stepdad went to pick up my older brother at work. I was at home with my mom and siblings. I was the older sibling. My mom was asleep because she had to get up at 5 a.m. I hear a knock on the door, and stupid ass me answered the door thinking it was my stepdad and brother that was locked out. I opened the door, and there stood a white dude that was in his 50s. His car was parked in the right-hand driveway. He asked if I knew where Wolf Street was. He had come from that direction. I said yeah, because we passed it on our way to my house. It was about a mile down the road in a black neighborhood. All right, why is the neighborhood got to be black? I pointed in the direction it was, and then he asked stemmingly, is anyone else home? I said, yeah, my mom is here. He then asked where my dad was, and luckily they were passing the house getting ready to pull into the driveway with the garage. I pointed and said, right there. He quickly turns around and starts walking back to his car. My stepdad comes inside furious. He asked what the fuck was all that about, and I told him. He said I could have been kidnapped because the car had 3 other guys, and the guy acted really suspicious when they drove off. I'm not sure if I would have been kidnapped, especially with my mom there, but who knows? Yeah, bro. I think they were going to rob that house. I genuinely think they were going to rob that house. They probably knocked on the door to see if anybody was home, for one. Then 2, you answer the door. So they're like, all we got to do is just tie up a fucking kid. You know what I mean? And there's 3 dudes. So they're thinking, okay, it's just this kid and the mom. Like, we can handle that. Like if your dad didn't come home at that time, that house would have got robbed. It would have got ransacked and robbed, bro. Oh my God. Did your parents never teach you that you don't ever open the door for under any circumstances? I was told that. When I was a kid, I was told you never open the door for anything. For anything. You never open the door. Unless I call you to open the door or anything like that. You never open the door for nothing. I never opened the door for shit when I was a kid. Ever. I was so fucking afraid of just like, who knows who could be there. And then I was also just afraid of just talking to people in general when I was a kid. So you know what I mean? I didn't even want to have a conversation with the motherfuckers. That's why whenever the like Jehovah's Witness and all that kind of shit would come to the door, I would act like I'm not home. I'm like, nope, going back to playing my Call of Duty. You know what I mean? I'm back to playing Madden. I'm like, no thanks. Nope, not me. That's crazy, dude. All right, I'm gonna do 2 more. Last summer, I moved into my parents-in-law's apartment with my boyfriend. Their entire house was an alarm system, or has an alarm system, including our apartment door. So a couple of months after moving in, we went on a hike together. When we got back to the car, I had a message from my parents who were in Maine asking if we had trouble with the alarm. While we were gone, our apartment door's alarm had gone off, but the police didn't catch anyone. A month or so later, while I was at school and my boyfriend was at work, the alarm went off again. I had gotten a text from my mom asking if I had trouble with the alarm, so I called her to tell her that nobody was home. Apparently, the alarm had gone off about an hour ago, and the alarm company told my mother that the apartment door had been opened and that somebody picked up the phone, used my name, and gave the wrong alarm code. However, my mom had assumed I had forgotten the code and told them not to call the police. Oh, the door was not damaged at all, and there was no visible evidence that someone had been in our apartment, so I'm not really sure why someone would have entered. My parents have rented the apartment to a lot of different people over the past 30 years, though, so it's possible that someone copied the key at some point or something. We ended up changing the locks and haven't had an incident since, but the whole incident made me so paranoid. Okay, if you've been renting the place out to people, why haven't you changed the locks after every tenant? That's the stupidest fucking thing, to keep the same locks. You realize people could just easily make a copy of that key, right? Like, dude, come on. That was a dumb mistake on their part, is that they didn't copy that or they didn't change the locks after every tenant. That was dumb of them. And then I still would have had the police go there just in case. Even if it was my daughter that forgot the code, I would still have the police go. I would not care. If the alarm code is not correct, the police are showing up. And then if it is my daughter, well, then my daughter can explain to them, oh, I forgot the code, so on and so forth, like everything is fine. But in the event that there is somebody using her name and, playing it smart, it's like, dude, the cops would show up and be able to handle that shit. Not this dumb situation of like, oh no, it's fine. Oh, it's fine. Nobody, we can get rid of it. Like, no, man, no. Oh my God, just crazy. Oh, goodness gracious. He's absolutely wild. This is going to be our last scenario for this thread. So I went to a community college for a year before I transferred to a 4-year school, and there was this really awkward looking guy in almost all of my classes. I was just taking general ed stuff, and I also saw him everywhere around campus in class. There he is. In the student center, there he is. Waiting to order some food, there he is. I never actually spoke to the guy, but he was everywhere. But it was a small school, so you see a bunch of people everywhere on campus, but no one quite as much as him. Then I transferred to a different school that was 2 hours away. I moved into my dorm and get ready to start class. Then when school started, I went to my first class, and there he was. That is kind of creepy. Like, this dude is a huge stalker. And there he was sitting in the front row. The same guy that was everywhere I was at the first school showed up in my first class after I transferred. Never saw him again after that semester, though. That is crazy. I don't know. I mean, again, I don't really know how all that stuff works, how he would be able to do all of that. Maybe he somehow knew you, but for him to stalk you that much was kind of crazy. And then I kind of, in my head, I weirdly thought to myself, what if he thought the same of her? You know what I mean? Like, is this chick stalking me? Like, what the fuck? Like, everywhere I go, I fucking see her. And then he switches schools, and then he's just like, son of a bitch, this bitch is here too, Like, that would be crazy if they both think like they're stalking each other. like he's just like, she's stalking me, and then he's like, he's like, she's stalking me, and then she's like, he's stalking me. That would be crazy. Honestly though, at that point, if I would have transferred schools and then saw him, I would have talked to him. I'd have been like, hey, so, look, I don't think this is a coincidence anymore. At the last school, I saw you in my class, at lunch, around the campus. I saw you everywhere. And then I transfer schools and I see you again. What's up? What's going on here? Like, at that point, that's when you talk to the person and try to really figure out what's going on, because at this point, I think it's a little less of a coincidence and a little more of there's something going on. One party is a little more involved than the other party. I can't say if it's her, I can't say if it's him, but that just seems a little too inconspicuous to just be like, it's just chance. Like, I don't know, but that's going to be it for that thread, man. Hope you guys found that thread interesting. I know I did. There is some creepy people out there and some creepy shit happening. My goodness. Again, these threads never cease to amaze and blow my mind about the shit that happens in our crazy world. We live in such a small, confined, space as far as like where we live. Like, not a lot of people really get outside of their city and their state and all that kind of stuff. So, their worldview is so very small. But then when you have stuff like this where there are people from different parts of the world and different, outside your city, your state, your country, and you're getting to experience all these other things, you're just like, oh my God, this is kind of crazy. So I like it. I think it's awesome to kind of get different perspectives and see what is just going on out in the world, and hopefully you guys are enjoying that too. I'm gonna make the announcement super duper fast, and then we're gonna hop into Chapter 7 and 8 of our book, A Court of Thorns and Roses. Patreon.com/My Last One Podcast. Get an exclusive episode every single Friday, as well as being able to send in your scenarios to be featured on Tuesday as well as Sunday shows. If you're an audio listener, keep downloading the podcast as well as rating us 5 stars. It's free $99 to do all that, and it supports us a lot. If you want to support us even more, go ahead and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, as well as YouTube. That helps out so much. If you are loving these Thursday episodes and you want to watch only the Thursday episodes, I do have 2 playlists down in the description for you guys. I have the playlist for the entirety of Haunting Adeline, chapters 1 all the way to 42. Then I'm also updating the playlist for this book as well. So both those playlists will be down in the description, whether you're listening on YouTube or you are listening on Spotify. Or if you're on YouTube and you just want to listen on Spotify, you could do that too. There is a YouTube playlist as well as a Spotify playlist, so go check that out if you only want to watch these episodes. So I got you guys on that. I'm updating that playlist regularly, and any further books, they're gonna have playlists as well. So you guys will always be able to just watch these episodes if these are the episodes that you guys enjoy the most. Without further ado, though, I'm gonna shut up. We're gonna get into the book, and let's get to it. Let me go ahead and make sure audio is good for you guys.
Chapter 7. The golden-haired High Fae and Lucian were lounging at the table when Alice returned me to the dining room. They no longer had plates before them, but still sipped from golden goblets. Real gold, not paint or foil. Our mismatched cutlery flashed through my mind as I paused in the middle of the room. Such wealth, such staggering wealth, when we had nothing. A half-wild beast, Nesta had called me. But compared to him, compared to this place, compared to the elegant, easy way they held their goblets, the way the golden-haired one had called me human, we were all half-wild beasts to the High Fae, even if they were the ones who could don fur and claws. Food still remained on the table, the array of spices lingering in the air, beckoning. I was starving, my head unnervingly light. The golden-haired High Fae's mask gleamed with the last rays of the afternoon sunshine. Before you ask again, the food is safe for you to eat. He pointed to the chair at the other end of the table. No sign of his claws. When I didn't move, he sighed sharply. What do you want, then? I said nothing. To eat, flee, save my family? Lucian drawled from his seat along the length of the table. I told you so, Tamlin. He flicked a glance toward his friend. Your skills with females have definitely become rusty in recent decades. Tamlin. He glowered at Lucian, shifting in his seat. I tried not to stiffen at the other bit of information Lucian had given away. Decades. Tamlin didn't look much older than me, but his kind was immortal. He could be hundreds of years old, thousands. My mouth dried up as I carefully studied their strange, masked faces, unearthly, primal, and imperious. Like immovable gods or feral courtiers. "Well," Lucian said, his remaining russet eye fixed on me. "You don't look half as bad now. A relief, I suppose, since you're to live with us. Though the tunic isn't as pretty as the dress." Wolves ready to pounce. That's what they were, just like their friend. I was all too aware of my diction, of the very breath I took as I said, "I'd prefer not to wear that dress." "And why not?" Lucian crooned. It was Tamlin who answered for me. "Because killing us is easier in pants." I kept my face blank, willed my heart to calm as I said, "Now that I'm here, what do you plan to do with me?" Lucian snorted, but Tamlin said with a snarl of annoyance, "Just sit down." An empty seat had been pulled out at the end of the table. So many foods, piping hot and wafting those enticing spices. The servants had probably brought out new food while I'd washed. So much wasted. I clenched my hands into fists. "We're not going to bite." Lucian's white teeth gleamed in a way that suggested otherwise. I avoided his gaze. Avoided that strange, animated metal eye that focused on me as I inched to my seat and sat down. Tamlin rose, stalking around the table. Closer and closer, each movement smooth and lethal, a predator blooded with power. It was an effort to keep still, especially as he picked up a dish, brought it over to me, and piled some meat and sauce onto my plate. I said quietly, "I can serve myself." Anything to keep him well away from me. Tamlin paused, so close that one swipe of those claws lurking under his skin could rip my throat out. That was why the leather baldric bore no weapons. Why use them when you were a weapon yourself? "It's an honor for a human to be served by a high fae," he said roughly. I swallowed hard. He continued piling various foods on my plate, stopping only when it was heaping with meat and sauce and bread, and filled my glass with pale, sparkling wine. I loosed a breath as he prowled back to his seat, though he could probably hear it. I wanted nothing more than to bury my face in the plate and then eat my way down the table, but I pinned my hands beneath my thighs and stared at the two fairies. They watched me, too closely to be casual. Tamlin straightened a bit and said, "You look better than before." Was that a compliment? I could have sworn Lucian gave Tamlin an encouraging nod. "And your hair is clean." Perhaps it was my raging hunger making me hallucinate the piss-poor attempt at flattery. Still, I leaned back and kept my words calm and quiet, the way I might speak to any other predator. "You're high fae? Fairy nobility?" Lucian coughed and looked to Tamlin. "You can take that question." "Yes," Tamlin said, frowning, as if searching for anything to say to me. He settled on merely, "We are." Fine. A man, fairy, a few words. I had killed his friend, was an unwanted guest. I wouldn't want to talk to me either. "What do you plan to do with me now that I'm here?" Tamlin's eyes didn't leave my face. "Nothing. Do whatever you want." "So I'm not to be your slave?" I dared ask. Lucian choked on his wine, but Tamlin didn't smile. I don't keep slaves. I ignored the release of tightness in my chest at that. But what am I to do with my life here? I pressed. Do you wish me to earn my keep? To work? A stupid question if he hadn't considered it, but I had to know. Tamlin stiffened. What you do with your life isn't my problem. Lucian pointedly cleared his throat, and Tamlin flashed him a glare. After an exchanged look I couldn't read, Tamlin sighed and said, Don't you have any interests? No. Not entirely true, but I wasn't about to explain the painting to him. Not when he was apparently having a great deal of trouble just talking to me civilly. Lucian muttered, So typically human. Tamlin's mouth quirked to the side. Do whatever you want with your time. Just stay out of trouble. So you truly mean for me to stay here forever? What I meant was, so I'm to stay in this luxury while my family starves to death? I didn't make the rules, Tamlin said tersely. My family is starving, I said. I didn't mind begging. Not for this. I'd given my word and held to that word for so long that I was nothing and no one without it. Please let me go. There must be some other loophole out of the treaty's rules, some other way to atone. Atone? Lucian said. Have you even apologized yet? Apparently, all attempts to flatter me were dead and gone, so I looked Lucian right in his remaining russet eye and said, I'm sorry. Lucian leaned back in his chair. How did you kill him? Was it a bloody fight or just cold-blooded murder? My spine stiffened. I shot him with an ash arrow, and then an ordinary arrow through the eye. He didn't put up a fight. After the first shot, he just stared at me. You killed him anyway, though he made no move to attack you, and then you skinned him, Lucian hissed. Enough, Lucian, Tamlin said to his courtier with a snarl. I don't want to hear details. He turned to me, ancient and brutal and unyielding. I spoke before he could say anything. My family won't last a month without me. Lucian chuckled, and I gritted my teeth. Do you know what it's like to be hungry? I demanded, anger rising to devour any common sense. Do you know what it's like to not know when your next meal will be? Tamlin's jaw tightened. Your family is alive and well cared for. You think so low of fairies that you believe I'd take their only source of income and nourishment and not replace it? I straightened. You swear it? Even if fairies couldn't lie, I had to hear it. A low, incredulous laugh. On everything that I am and possess. Why not tell me that when we left the cottage? Would you have believed me? Do you even believe me now? Tamlin's claws embedded in the arms of his chair. Why should I trust a word you say? You're all masters of spinning your truths to your own advantage. Some would say it's unwise to insult a fae in his home, Tamlin ground out. Some would say you should be grateful for me finding you before another one of my kind came to claim the debt, for sparing your life and then offering you the chance to live in comfort. I shot to my feet, wisdom be damned, and was about to kick back my chair when invisible hands clamped on my arms and shoved me back into the seat. Do not do whatever it was you were contemplating, Tamlin said. I went still as the tang of magic seared my nose. I tried to twist in the chair, testing the invisible bonds, but my arms were secured and my back was pressed into the wood so hard that it ached. I glanced at the knife beside my plate. I should have gone for it first. Futile effort or no. "I'm going to warn you once," Tamlin said too softly. "Only once. And then it's on you, human. I don't care if you go live somewhere else in Prithian, but if you cross the wall, if you flee, your family will no longer be cared for." His words were like a stone to the head. If I escaped, if I even tried to run, I might very well doom my family. And even if I dared risk it, even if I succeeded in reaching them, where would I take them? I couldn't stow my sisters away on a ship, and once we arrived somewhere else, somewhere safe, we'd have nowhere to live. But for him to hold my family's well-being against me, to throw away their survival if I stepped out of line... I opened my mouth, but his snarl rattled the glasses. "Is that not a fair bargain? And if you flee, then you might not be so lucky with whoever comes to retrieve you next." His claws slipped back under his knuckles. "The food is not enchanted or drugged, and it will be your own damn fault if you faint. So you're going to sit at this table and eat, Farah. And Lucian will do his best to be polite." He threw a pointed look in his direction. Lucian shrugged. The invisible bonds loosened, and I winced as I whacked my hands on the underside of the table. The bonds on my legs and middle remained intact. One glance at Tamlin's smoldering green eyes told me what I wanted to know. His guest or not, I wasn't going to get up from this table until I'd eaten something. I'd think about the sudden change in my plans to escape later. For now, I eyed the silver fork and carefully picked it up. They still watched me, watched my every move, the flare of my nostrils as I sniffed the food on my plate. No metallic stench of magic. And fairies couldn't lie, so he had to be right about the food then. Stabbing a piece of chicken, I took a bite. It was an effort to keep from grunting. I hadn't had food this good in years. Even the meals we'd had before our downfall were little more than ashes compared to this. I ate my entire plate in silence, too aware of the high fae observing every bite. But as I reached for a second helping of chocolate torte, the food vanished. Just vanished. As if it had never existed, not a crumb left behind. Swallowing hard, I set my fork down so they wouldn't see my hands start to shake. "One more bite and you'll hurl your guts up," Tamlin said, drinking deeply from his goblet. The bonds holding me loosened. Silent permission to leave. "Thank you for the meal," I said. It was all I could think of. "Won't you stay for wine?" Lucian said, with sweet venom from where he lounged in his seat. I braced my hands on my chair to rise. "I'm tired. I'd like to sleep." "It's been a few decades since I last saw one of you," Lucian drawled, "but you humans never change, so I don't think I'm wrong in asking why you find our company to be so unpleasant, when surely the men back home aren't much to look at." At the other end of the table, Tamlin gave his emissary a long, warning look. Lucian ignored it. "You're high fae," I said tightly. "I'd ask why you'd even bother inviting me here at all, or dining with me." Fool. I really should have been killed 10 times over already. Lucian said, "True, but indulge me. You're a human woman, and yet you'd rather eat hot coals than sit here longer than necessary. Ignoring this," he waved a hand at the metal eye and brutal scar on his face, "surely we're not so miserable to look at." Typical fairy vanity and arrogance. That, at least, the legends had been right about. I tucked the knowledge away. Unless you have someone back home. Unless there's a line of suitors out the door of your hovel that makes us seem like worms in comparison. There was enough dismissal there that I took a little bit of satisfaction in saying, I was close with a man back in my village. Before that treaty ripped me away. Before it became clear that you are allowed to do as you please to us, but we can hardly strike back against you. Tamlin and Lucian exchanged glances, but it was Tamlin who said, Are you in love with this man? No, I said as casually as I could. It wasn't a lie, but even if I'd felt anything like that for Isaac, my answer would have been the same. It was bad enough that High Fae now knew my family existed. I didn't need to add Isaac to that list. Again, that shared look between the two males. And do you love anyone else? Tamlin said through clenched teeth. A laugh burst out of me, tinged with hysteria. No. I looked between them. Nonsense. These lethal, immortal beings really had nothing better to do than this? Is this really what you care to know about me? If I find you more handsome than human men, and if I have a man back at home? Why bother to ask at all when I'll be stuck here for the rest of my life? A hot line of anger sliced through my senses. We wanted to learn more about you since you'll be here for a good while, Tamlin said, his lips a thin line. But Lucian's pride tends to get in the way of his manners. He sighed, as if ready to be done with me, and said, Go rest. We're both busy most days, so if you need anything, ask the staff. They'll help you. Why? I asked. Why be so generous? Lucian gave me a look that suggested he had no idea either, given that I'd murdered their companion, but Tamlin stared at me for a long moment. I kill too often as it is, Tamlin said finally, shrugging his broad shoulders. And you're insignificant enough not to ruffle this estate, unless you decide to start killing us. A faint warmth bloomed in my cheeks, my neck. Insignificant, yes, I was insignificant to their lives, their power. As insignificant as the fading, chipped designs I'd painted around the cottage. Well, I said, not quite feeling grateful at all. Thank you. He gave a distant nod and motioned for me to leave. Dismissed, like the lowly human I was. Lucian propped his chin on a fist and gave me a lazy half-smile. Enough. I got to my feet and backed toward the door. Putting my back to them would have been like walking away from a wolf, sparing my life or no. They said nothing when I slipped out the door. A moment later, Lucian's barking laugh echoed into the halls, followed by a sharp, vicious growl that shut him up. I slept fitfully that night, and the lock on my bedroom door felt more like a joke than anything. I was wide awake before dawn, but I remained staring at the filigreed ceiling, watching the growing light creep between the drapes, savoring the softness of the down mattress. I was usually out of the cottage by first light, though my sisters hissed at me every morning for waking them so early. If I were home, I'd already be entering the woods, not wasting a moment of precious sunlight, listening to the drowsy chatter of the few winter birds. Instead, this bedroom and the house beyond were silent, the enormous bed foreign and empty. A small part of me missed the warmth of my sisters' bodies overlapping with mine. Nesta must be stretching her legs and smiling at the extra room. She was probably content imagining me in the belly of a fairy, probably using the news as a chance to be fussed over by the villagers. Maybe my fate would prompt them to give my family some handouts. Or maybe Tamlin had given them enough money, or food, or whatever he thought taking care of them consisted of, to last through the winter. Or maybe the villagers would turn on my family, not wanting to be associated with people tied with Prythian, and run them out of town. I buried my face in the pillow, pulling the blankets higher. If Tamlin had indeed provided for them, if those benefits would cease the moment I crossed the wall, then they'd likely resent my return more than celebrate it. Your hair is clean. A pathetic compliment. I supposed that if he'd invited me to live here, to spare my life, he couldn't be completely wicked. Perhaps he'd just been trying to smooth over our very, very rough beginning. Maybe there would be some way to persuade him to find some loophole, to get whatever magic that bound the treaty to spare me. And if not some way, then someone. I was drifting from one thought to another, trying to sort through the jumble when the lock on the door clicked, and there was a screech and a thud, and I bolted upright to find Alice in a heap on the floor. The length of rope I'd made from the curtain trimmings now hung loosely from wherever I'd rigged it to snap into anyone's face. It had been the best I could do with what I had. I'm sorry, I blurted, leaping from the bed, but Alice was already up, hissing at me as she brushed off her apron. She frowned at the rope dangling from the light fixture. What in the bottomless depths of the cauldron is... I didn't think anyone would be in here so early, and I meant to take it down, and... Alice looked me over from head to toe. You think a bit of rope snapping in my face will keep me from breaking your bones? My blood went cold. You think that will do anything against one of us? I might have kept apologizing were it not for the sneer she gave me. I crossed my arms. It was a warning bell to give me time to run, not a trap. She seemed poised to spit on me, but then her sharp brown eyes narrowed. You can't outrun us either, girl. I know, I said, my heart calming at last. But at least I wouldn't face my death unaware. Alice barked out a laugh. My master gave his word that you could live here. Live, not die. We will obey. She studied the hanging bit of rope. But did you have to wreck those lovely curtains? I didn't want to, tried not to, but a hint of a smile tugged on my lips. Alice strode over to the remnants of the curtains and threw them open, revealing a sky that was still a deep periwinkle, splashed with hues of pumpkin and magenta from the rising dawn. I am sorry, I said again. Alice clicked her tongue. At least you're willing to put up a fight, girl. I'll give you that. I opened my mouth to speak, but another female servant with a bird mask entered, a breakfast tray in hand. She bid me a curt good morning, set the tray on a small table by the window, and disappeared into the attached bathing chamber. The sound of running water filled the room. I sat at the table and studied the porridge and eggs and bacon. Bacon! Again! Such similar food to what we ate across the wall. I don't know why I'd expected otherwise. Alice poured me a cup of what looked and smelled like tea. Full-bodied aromatic tea, no doubt imported at great expense. Prythian and my adjoining homeland weren't exactly easy to reach. What is this place? I asked her quietly. Where is this place? It's safe, and that's all you need to know, Alice said, setting down the teapot. At least the house is. If you go poking about the grounds, keep your wits about you. Fine, if you wouldn't answer that. I tried again. What sort of fairies should I look out for? All of them, Alice said. My master's protection only goes so far. They'll want to hunt and kill you for just being a human, regardless of what you did to Andrus. Another useless answer. I dug into my breakfast, savoring each rich sip of tea, and she slipped into the bathing chamber. When I was done eating and bathing, I refused Alice's offer and dressed myself in another exquisite tunic, this one of purple so deep it could have been black. I wished I knew the name for the color, but catalogued it anyway. I pulled on the brown boots I'd worn the night before, and as I sat before a marble vanity letting Alice braid my wet hair, I cringed at my reflection. It wasn't pleasing, though not for its actual appearance. While my nose was relatively straight, it was the other feature I had inherited from my mother. I could still remember how her nose would crinkle with feigned amusement when one of her fabulously wealthy friends made some unfunny joke. At least I had my father's soft mouth, though it made a mockery of my too sharp cheekbones and hollow cheeks. I couldn't bring myself to look at my slightly up-tilted eyes. I knew I'd see Nesta or my mother looking back at me. I'd sometimes wondered if that was why my sister had insulted me about my looks. I was a far cry from ugly, but I bore too much of the people we'd hated and loved for Nesta to stand it, for me to stand it too. Though I supposed that for Tamlin, for High Fae used to ethereal, flawless beauty, it had been a struggle to find a compliment. Very bastard. Alice finished my plate, and I jumped from the bench before she could weave in little flowers from the basket she'd brought. I would have lived up to my namesake were it not for the effects of poverty, but I'd never particularly cared. Beauty didn't mean anything in the forest. When I asked Alice what I was to do now, what I was to do with the entirety of my mortal life, she shrugged and suggested a walk in the gardens. I almost laughed, but I kept my tongue still. I'd be foolish to push aside potential allies. I doubted she had Tamlin's ear, and I couldn't press her about it yet, but at least a walk provided a chance to glean some sense of my surroundings, and whether there was anyone else who might plead my case to Tamlin. The halls were silent and empty, strange for such a large estate. They'd mentioned others the night before, but I saw and heard no sign of them. A balmy breeze scented with hyacinth, I realized, if only from Elaine's small garden, floated down the halls, carrying with it the pleasant chirping of a bunting, a bird I wouldn't hear back home for months, if I ever heard them at all. I was almost to the grand staircase when I noticed the paintings. I hadn't let myself really look yesterday, but now, in the empty hall with no one to see me, a flash of color amid a shadowy, gloomy background made me stop, a riot of color and texture that compelled me to face the gilded frame. I'd never seen anything like it. It's just a still life, a part of me said. And it was. A green glass vase with an assortment of flowers drooping over its narrow top, blossoms and leaves of every shape and size and color, roses, tulips, morning glory, goldenrod, maiden's lace, peonies. The skill it must have taken to make them look so lifelike, to make them more than lifelike. Just a vase of flowers against a dark background, but more than that. The flowers seemed to be vibrant with their own light, as if in defiance of the shadows gathered around them. The mastery needed to make the glass vase hold that light, to bend the light with the water within, as if the vase did indeed have weight to it atop its stone pedestal. Remarkable. I could have stared at it for hours, and the countless paintings along this hall alone could have occupied my entire day. But garden, plans. Still, As I moved on, I couldn't deny that this place was far more civilized than I'd thought. Peaceful, even, if I was willing to admit it. And if the High Fae were indeed gentler than human legend and rumor had led me to believe, then maybe convincing Alice of my misery might not be too hard. If I could win over Alice, convince her that the treaty had been wrong to demand such payment from me, she might indeed see if there was anything to get me out of this debt, and... "You," someone said, and I jumped back a step. In the light of the open glass doors to the garden, a towering male figure stood silhouetted before me. Tamlin. He wore those warrior's clothes, cut close to show off his toned body, and 3 simple knives were now sheathed along his baldric, each long enough to look like it could gut me as easily as his beast's claws. His blonde hair had been tied back from his face, revealing those pointed ears and that strange, beautiful mask. "Where are you going?" he said, gruffly enough that it almost sounded like a demand. "You." I wondered if he even remembered my name. It took a moment to will enough strength into my legs to rise from my half-crouch. "Good morning," I said flatly. At least it was a better greeting than "you." "You said my time was to be spent however I wanted. I didn't realize I was under house arrest." His jaw tightened. "Of course you're not under house arrest." Even as he bit out the words, I couldn't ignore the sheer male beauty of that strong jaw, the richness of his golden tan skin. He was probably handsome, if he ever took off that mask. When he realized that I wasn't going to respond, he bared his teeth in what I supposed was an attempt at a smile and said, "Do you want a tour?" "No, thank you," I managed to get out, conscious of every awkward motion of my body as I edged around him. He stepped into my path, close enough that he conceded a step back. "I've been sitting inside all morning. I need some fresh air." "And you're insignificant enough that you wouldn't be a bother," he was probably thinking. "I'm fine," I said, casually dodging him. "You've been generous enough." I tried to sound like I meant it. A half smile, not so pleasant, no doubt unused to being denied. "Do you have some sort of problem with me?" "No," I said quietly and walked through the doors. He let out a low snarl. "I'm not going to kill you, Farah. I don't break my promises." I almost stumbled down the garden steps as I glanced over my shoulder. He stood atop the stairs, as solid and ancient as the pale stones of the manor. "Kill, but not harm? Is that another loophole, one that Lucian might use against me, or anyone else here?" "They're under orders not to even touch you." "Yet I'm still trapped in your realm for breaking a rule I didn't know existed. Why was your friend even in the woods that day? I thought the treaty banned your kind from entering our lands." He just stared at me. Perhaps I'd gone too far, questioning him too much. Perhaps he could tell why I'd really asked. "The treaty," he said quietly, "doesn't ban us from doing anything except for enslaving you. The wall is an inconvenience. If we cared to, we could shatter it and march through to kill you all." I might be forced to live in Prithian forever, but my family... I dared ask. "And do you care to destroy the wall?" He looked me up and down, as if deciding whether I was worth the effort of explaining. "I have no interest in the mortal lands, though I can't speak for my kind." But he still hadn't answered my question. "Then what was your friend doing there?" Tamlin stilled. Such unearthly primal grace, even to his breathing.
There is a sickness in these lands, across Prithian. There has been for almost 50 years now. It is why this house and these lands are so empty. Most have left. The blight spreads slowly, but it has made magic act strangely. My own powers are diminished due to it. These masks,
he tapped on his,
are the result of a surge of it that occurred during a masquerade 49 years ago. Even now, we can't remove them.
Stuck in masks. For nearly 50 years. I would have gone mad, would have peeled my skin off my face. You didn't have a mask as a beast, and neither did your friend.
The blight is cruel like that.
Either live as a beast or live with the mask. What sort of sickness is it?
It's not a disease, not a plague or illness. It's focused solely on magic, on those dwelling in Prithian. Andrus was across the wall that day because I sent him to search for a cure.
Can it hurt humans? My stomach twisted. Will it spread over the wall?
Yes, he said. There is a chance of it affecting mortals and your territory. More than that, I don't know. It's slow-moving, and your kind is safe for now. We haven't had any progression in decades. Magic seems to have stabilized, even though it's been weakened.
That he'd even admitted so much spoke volumes about how he imagined my future. I was never going home, never going to encounter another human to whom I might spill this secret vulnerability. A mercenary told me she believed fairies might be thinking of attacking. Is it related? A hint of a smile, perhaps a bit surprised.
I don't know. Do you talk to mercenaries often?
I talk to whoever bothers to tell me anything useful. He straightened, and it was only his promise not to kill me that kept me from cringing. Then he rolled his shoulders as if shaking off his annoyance.
Was the tripwire you rigged in your room for me?
I sucked on my teeth. Can you blame me if it was?
I might take an animal form, but I am civilized, Feyre.
So he did remember my name, at least. But I looked pointedly at his hands, at the razor-sharp tips of those long, curved claws poking through his tanned skin. Noticing my stare, he tucked his hands behind his back. He said sharply,
"I'll see you at dinner."
It wasn't a request, but I still gave him a nod as I strode off between the hedges, not caring where I was going, only that he stayed far behind. A sickness in their lands, affecting their magic, draining it from them. A magical blight that might one day spread to the human world. After so many centuries without magic, we'd be defenseless against it, against whatever it could do to humans. I wondered if any of the High Fae would bother warning my kind. It didn't take me long to know the answer. Chapter 8. I pretended to meander through the exquisite and silent gardens, mentally marking the paths and clever places for hiding if I ever needed them. He'd taken my weapons, and I wasn't stupid enough to hope for an ash tree somewhere on the property with which to make my own. But his baldric had been laden with knives. There had to be an armory somewhere on the estate, and if not, I would find another weapon then, steal it if I had to, just in case. Upon inspection the night before, I'd learned that there was no lock on my window. Sneaking out and rappelling down the wisteria vines wouldn't be difficult at all. I'd climbed enough trees to not mind the height. Not that I planned to escape, but it was good to know, at least, how I might do should I ever be desperate enough to risk it. I didn't doubt Tamlin's claim that the rest of Prithian was deadly for a human, and if there was indeed some blight on these lands, I was better off here for the time being. But not without trying to find someone who might plead my case to Tamlin. Though Lucian, he could do with someone snapping at him if you've the courage for it, Alice had said to me yesterday. I chewed on my stubby nails as I walked, considering every possible plan and pitfall. I'd never been particularly good with words, had never learned the social warfare my sisters and mother had been so adept at, but I'd been decent enough when selling hides at the village market. So perhaps I'd seek out Tamlin's emissary, even if he detested me. He clearly had little interest in my living here. He'd suggested killing me. Perhaps he'd be eager to send me back, to persuade Tamlin to find some other way to fulfill the treaty, if there even was one. I approached a bench in an alcove blooming with foxglove when the sound of steps on shifting gravel filled the air. 2 pairs of light, quick feet. I straightened, peering down the way I'd come, but the path was empty. I lingered at the edge of an open field of lanky meadow buttercups. The vibrant green and yellow field was deserted. Behind me arose a gnarled crabapple tree in full, glorious bloom, the petals of its flowers littering the shaded bench on which I'd been about to sit. A breeze set the branches rustling, a waterfall of white petals flittering down like snow. I scanned the garden, the field, carefully watching and listening for those 2 sets of feet. There was nothing in the tree or behind it. A prickling sensation ran down my spine. I'd spent enough time in the woods to trust my instincts. Someone stood behind me, perhaps 2 of them. A faint sniff and a quiet giggle issued from far too close. My heart leaped into my throat. I cast a subtle glance over my shoulder, but only a shining silvery light flickered in the corner of my vision. I had to turn around. I had to face it. The gravel crunched, nearer now. The shimmering in the corner of my eye grew larger, separating into 2 small figures no taller than my waist. My hands clenched into fists. "Farah!" Alice's voice cut across the garden. I jumped out of my skin as she called me again. "Farah, lunch!" she hollered. I whirled, a shout forming on my lips to alert her to whatever stood behind me, raising my fists, however futile it would be. But the shining things had vanished, along with their sniffing and giggling, and I found myself facing a weathered statue of 2 merry, bounding lambs. I rubbed my neck. Alice called me again, and I took a shuddering breath as I returned to the manor. But even as I strode through the hedges, carefully retracing my steps back to the house, I couldn't erase the creeping feeling that someone still watched me, curious and wanting to play. I stole a knife from dinner that night, just to have something, anything to defend myself with. It turned out that dinner was the only meal I was invited to attend, which was fine. 3 meals a day with Tamlin and Lucian would have been torturous. I could endure an hour of sitting at their fancy table if it made them think I was docile and had no plans to change my fate. While Lucian ranted to Tamlin about some malfunction of the magical carved eye that indeed allowed him to see, I slipped my knife down the sleeve of my tunic. My heart beat so fast I thought they could hear it, but Lucian continued speaking, and Tamlin's focus remained on his courtier. I supposed I should have pitied them for the masks they were forced to wear, for the blight that had infected their magic and people. But the less I interacted with them, the better, especially when Lucian seemed to find everything I said to be hilariously human and uneducated. Snapping at him wouldn't help my plans. It would be an uphill battle to win his favor, if only for the fact that I was alive and his friend was not. I'd have to deal with him alone, or risk raising Tamlin's suspicions too soon. Lucian's red hair shone in the firelight, the colors flickering with every movement he made, and the jewels in the hilt of his sword glinted. The ornate blade, so unlike the baldric of knives, still strapped across Tamlin's chest. But there was no one here to use a sword against. And while the sword was embedded with jewels and filigree, it was large enough to be more than decoration. Perhaps it had something to do with those invisible things in the garden. Maybe he'd lost his eye and earned that scar in battle. I fought against a shudder. Alice had said the house was safe, but warned me to keep my wits about me. What might lurk beyond the house, or be able to use my human senses against me? Just how far would Tamlin's order not to harm me stretch? What kind of authority did he hold? Lucian paused, and I found him smirking at me, making the scar even more brutal.
"Were you admiring my sword, or just contemplating killing me, Feyre?"
"Of course not," I said softly, and glanced at Tamlin. The gold flecks in his eyes glowed, even from the other end of the table. My heart beat at a gallop. Had he somehow heard me take the knife? The whisper of metal on wood? I forced myself to look again at Lucian. His lazy, vicious grin was still there. Act civilized, behave, possibly win him to my side. I could do that. Tamlin broke the silence.
"Feyre likes to hunt."
"I don't like to hunt." I should have probably used a more polite tone, but I went on. "I hunt out of necessity. And how did you know that?" Tamlin's stare was bald, assessing.
"Why else were you in the woods that day? You had a bow and arrow in your house."
I wondered whether he'd almost said hovel.
"When I saw your father's hands, I knew he wasn't the one using them."
He gestured to my scarred, calloused hands.
"You told him about the rations and money from pelts. Fairies might be many things, but we're not stupid. Unless your ridiculous legends claim that about us, too."
Ridiculous. Insignificant. I stared at the crumbs of bread and swirls of remaining sauce on my golden plate. Had I been at home, I would have licked my plate clean, desperate for any extra bit of nourishment. And the plates? I could have bought a team of horses, a plow, and a field for just one of them. Disgusting. Lucian cleared his throat.
"How old are you, anyway?"
19. Pleasant, civilized.
Lucian tisked. "So young and so grave, and a skilled killer already."
I tightened my hands into fists, the metal of my knife now warm against my skin. Docile, unthreatening, tame. I'd made my mother a promise, and I'd keep it. Tamlin's looking after my family wasn't the same as my looking after them. That wild, small dream could still come to pass. My sisters comfortably married off, and a lifetime with my father, with enough food for us both, and enough time to maybe paint a little, or to maybe learn what I wanted. It could still happen, in a faraway land, perhaps, if I ever got out of this bargain. I could still cling to that scrap of a dream, though these high fae would likely laugh at how typically human it was to think so small, to want so little. Yet any bit of information might help, and if I showed interest in them, perhaps they would warm to me. What was this but another trap in the woods? So I said, "So is this what you do with your lives? Spare humans from the treaty and have fine meals? I gave a pointed glance toward Tamlin's baldric, the warrior's clothes, Lucian's sword. Lucian smirked. We also dance with the spirits under the full moon and snatch human babes from their cradles to replace them with changelings. Didn't, Tamlin interrupted, his deep voice surprisingly gentle. Didn't your mother tell you anything about us? I prodded the table with my forefinger, digging my short nails into the wood. My mother didn't have the time to tell me stories. I could reveal that part of my past, at least. Lucian, for once, didn't laugh. After a rather stilted pause, Tamlin asked, How did she die? When I lifted my brows, he added a bit more softly, I didn't see signs of an older woman in your house. Predator or not, I didn't need his pity. But I said, Typhus, when I was 8. I rose from my seat to leave. Feyre, Tamlin said, and I half turned. A muscle feathered in his cheek. Lucian glanced between us, that metal eye roving, but kept silent. Then Tamlin shook his head, the movement more animal than anything, and murmured, I'm sorry for your loss. I tried to keep from grimacing as I turned on my heel and left. I didn't want or need his condolences. Not for my mother. Not when I hadn't missed her in years. Let Tamlin dismiss me as a rude, uncouth human not worth his careful watch. I'd be better off persuading Lucian to speak to Tamlin on my behalf. And soon, before any of the others whom they'd mention appeared, or this blight of theirs grew. Tomorrow. I'd speak to Lucian then, test him out a bit. In my room, I found a small satchel in the armoire and filled it with a spare set of clothes, along with my stolen knife. It was a pitiful blade, but a piece of cutlery was better than nothing. Just in case I was ever allowed to go, and had to leave at a moment's notice. Just
All right. That was chapters 7 and 8. You know, at the end of the first chapter, or the end of the 7th chapter, I was kind of like, wait a minute. I'm getting a little bit of Haunting Adeline vibes, if I'm being honest with you, just in the fact that, like, the way she was looking at him is in certain ways that Adeline would be looking at Zaid, you know, to where he's like, he's a powerful guy, he's rich, he's got all these connections, so on and so forth, and she's like, he's super handsome, but then, you know, she kind of pulls herself away like, nah, no, you're hot, but it's like that whole situation, you're a 10, but, you know what I mean, so, I don't know, I do feel like, and then he was just like, hey, so, you know, you single? And I'm just like, oh, okay, my man's just trying to get up in that, you know, like, and it's weird because it's like he's trying, but he ain't trying. Like with Zaid, you could tell all right off the rip he was trying to get with Adeline, but with him, it seems like he's being a little really subtle about it. I don't know. Again, there is a little love brewing, I'm sure, and she's fighting it. She's like, nah, fuck you guys, you know, like you're hot, but no thanks, you know. But I don't know. That's gonna be it for today. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. This episode's already damn near an hour and a half, so I'm not even gonna close. Again, Patreon. Subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram as well as TikTok, download and rate the podcast 5 stars. I love you guys all. I'll see you on Friday if you're on Patreon, and then Sunday if you're not. I love you guys all. See you. Peace.